Sometimes you need to rely on third-party solutions or service providers because you might not be able to do everything in-house. This is especially true if you work as an IT support specialist in a small shop. In some cases, you'll have to trust that third party with a lot of potentially sensitive data or access. So how do you make sure that you aren't opening yourself up to a ton of unnecessary risk? When you contract services from a third party, you're trusting them to protect your data and any credentials involved. If they have subpar security, you're undermining your security defenses by potentially opening a new avenue of attack. It's important to hire trustworthy and reputable vendors whenever you can. You also need to manage the engagements in a controlled way. This involves conducting a vendor risk review or security assessment. In typical vendor security assessments, you ask vendors to complete a questionnaire that covers different aspects of their security policies, procedures, and defenses. The questionnaire is designed to determine whether or not they've implemented good security designs in their organization. For software services or hardware vendors, you might also ask to test the software or hardware. That way, you can evaluate it for potential security vulnerabilities or concerns before deciding to contract their services. It's important to understand how well protected your business partners are before deciding to work with them. If they have poor security practices, your organization's security could be at risk. If you contract services from a company that will be handling data on your behalf, the security of your data is in the hands of this third party. It's important to understand how safe your data will be with them. Sometimes, vendors will perform tasks for you, so they'll have access to your network and systems. In these cases, it's also important to understand how well secured the third party is. A compromise of their infrastructure could lead to a breach of your systems. While the questionnaire model is a quick way to assess a third party, it's not ideal. It depends on self-reporting of practices, which is pretty unreliable. Without a way to verify or prove what's stated in the questionnaire, you have to trust that the company is answering honestly. While you'd hope that a company you're doing business with would be honest, it's best to verify. If you can, ask for a third-party security assessment report. Some of the information on the questionnaire can be verified, like third-party security audit results and penetration testing reports. In the case of third-party software, you might be able to conduct some basic vulnerability assessments and tests to ensure the product has some reasonable security. There are lots of companies that will evaluate vendors for you for a price, but Google recently made their vendor security assessment questionnaires available for free. This is a great starting point to design your own vendor security assessment questionnaire, or you can just use these as is. If the third-party service involves the installation of any infrastructure equipment on site, pay close attention to how they're doing it. You have to make sure this equipment's managed in a way that doesn't negatively affect overall security. Let's say the vendor company requires remote access to the infrastructure device to perform maintenance. If that's the case, then make appropriate adjustments to firewall rules to restrict this access. That way, you'll make sure that it can't be used as an entry point into your network. Additional monitoring would also be recommended for this third-party device, since it represents a new potential attack surface in your network. If the vendor lets you, evaluate the hardware in a lab environment first. There, you can run in-depth vulnerability assessments and penetration testing of the hardware and make sure there aren't any obvious vulnerabilities in the product. Report your findings to the vendor and ask that they address any issues you discover.